Welcome back to the Food Fight podcast. I'm Matt Eastland. COP28, the 2023 United Nations Climate Change Conference, kicks off on November the 30th. In preparation, here on the podcast, we're releasing a series of mini episodes celebrating the work of some of the most innovative, food-focused companies and organisations featured at the conference.
Hi, my name is Katie McCoshan and I'm a Policy and International Engagement Manager at FOLU, which is the Food and Land Use Coalition. In the build-up to COP28, I wanted to talk to you about the importance of food systems and how we expect this to be, and hope it to be, key on the agenda as we go to Dubai in December, and also to talk a little bit about the role of food loss and waste as a key solution to tackling the challenges in our food system. FOLU stands for the Food and Land Use Coalition, and we are exactly kind of what the name says. So we're a coalition of 9 different partner organisations that work in 6, soon to be 7 countries, and we're trying to transform our food systems. And that means look at the ways in which food is kind of produced, how it's transported and moves through the value chain, all the way up to the consumer and to how it's wasted. And we look at how can we make those systems better for people and the planet? So we're not just kind of talking to people who work on climate change or people who work on environment, but making sure that we can also address issues of nutrition and health and farmer livelihoods as well. So it's kind of seeing the world as very interconnected and a big system. And that's why we work with lots of different actors to try and bring organisations in different places that may or may not have come together otherwise. Our aims for COP28 are quite ambitious. We kind of went to COP26 a little bit for the first time. We did a bit more at COP27, and we were engaging with different food systems actors to kind of almost meet each other. Like, food systems is quite new as a thing, really, if you look at kind of environmental movements more widely. And so COP27 was about meeting each other, convening, understanding what food systems mean and how these different actors can work together. And for COP28, there's been a massive shift, I think also globally, because food prices are going up. People are really seeing the impacts of food systems politically and as businesses. And so for COP28, we're trying to really drill down on that and be like, when we talk about food systems, what does it mean? Obviously, the energy and decarbonisation transition is really important, but food systems needs to be seen as up there as another critical transition that we need to go through, and one that's quite closely linked to energy as well. What we want to get out of COP28 is meaningful statements and implementation plans from governments. So COP, it's quite a specific policy process. We want to make sure that food systems is elevated in that, and there's several ways it can happen. It can be through the global stock take. This is the first time since the Paris Agreement that governments and parties are going to come together and talk about where we are, and I don't think the current state looks great. And it really doesn't look great for food systems, and we need that to be acknowledged so that there's actually a mandate politically for governments to go and do more. And there's 2 other things that have kind of been emerging, one of which was sort of kicked off today actually, is as a coalition of 70 other organisations, including FOLU and some kind of big names that you'd recognise like WWF, have come together and written a letter to negotiators that basically says, please can we do meaningful stuff on food systems? There's lots you can do. You can act on food loss and waste. And you can do this through policy processes, and it might sound a bit jargony, but there's 2 dialogues. We can go through the NDCs, which are the nationally determined contributions, and this is how countries set out that they're going to achieve their climate targets. And food systems isn't really in there. Food loss and waste is hardly in there. It's in FOLU did some analysis a few years ago, and 4 out of 50 of the NDCs that analysed mentioned food loss and waste. If we're not talking about it in these documents, ministries are not going to go and start implementing it and working with different stakeholders to make those changes. And then the other thing is, it was called the Coronavia Dialogue. It's now called it's the Sharm el-Sheikh Joint Work Group on Climate and Food Security. And it's amazing that climate and food security are in the same sentence in the context of COP, and that happened last year. But we really needed to start talking about food systems so that we can tackle the different elements, so that we're not just looking at agriculture and how that's produced, but we can talk about fisheries, and we can talk about regeneration and agroecology and food loss and waste and health and nutrition in that context, because I think we often miss that. So the importance of this COP is narrative, and it's around policy narrative, and it's about getting the words in the texts. And then second to that, it's about having governments actually come forward and say, this is what we're going to do. So we're expecting an Emirates Declaration on Food Systems, which is quite exciting. There's not been one of those before, and you can see what happened in the Beyond Oil and Gas movement, and you can see it in the kind of forest and land use movement, which are linked to food systems, but we need to be talking about systems change here. And we expect that to come out, and we want to see countries come forward and, say 100 countries sign this declaration. We need more countries to come forward and say, we've signed the declaration and we're going to do these things and we're going to do these actions and we're going to come back at COP30 and we're going to be accountable. And I think that is the second key thing that we need to happen. The narrative and then the actual accountability and actions from governments. There's a really strong link between food loss and waste and climate change. So if the food system contributes a third of greenhouse gases, food loss and waste is ranging from 8 to 10 to 12% of emissions as well. It's huge. It's like bigger than the contribution of aviation to greenhouse gas emissions. And I think we forget that. So even when we're wasting at home, that has an impact, and it all adds up. Kind of big countries of China, India, USA and Brazil collectively is 40%-ish of those emissions. It's massive. And I think we need to be better at communicating that, because it's something that's very clear and we can see it because we all see food being thrown away by ourselves, being lost in transport, being lost at supermarkets, being lost at the farm as well. And there's a really important methane element as well, which is methane is more potent than carbon dioxide and it's in the air for a shorter period of time. But when we're talking about, 2030, it's not far away. And so we need to think about those smaller timescales. And when food rots in landfill, it produces huge amounts of methane. And I think remembering that is really important as well. If I could send one message to the food industry, it would be to take food systems seriously, to always think about how your decisions link to other decisions, how it matters for nutrition and health and livelihoods. And also, we are all consumers, so remember that when we talk about food systems, don't forget about food loss and waste. Don't waste that lettuce because it's going to take 25 years to decompose in landfill. And just to make conscious decisions and really think about what it is that you're doing.
This has been the Food Fight podcast. As ever, if you'd like to find out more about what we do, head over to the EIT Food website at www.eitfood.eu. Also, please join the conversation via the hashtag EITFoodFight on our X channel at EITFood. And if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode.